Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, especially after lunch. And we will start with the parallel session number 17 that will be on grain and sugar-based biofuels. I'm Federico Salcedo. I'm the Regional Ethanol Consultant for Latin America at the U.S. Grains Council, and it's an honor and a privilege to be facilitating and moderating this panel. We've heard over the past 3 days of conference about the biofuels and especially about grains, basically talking about corn, ethanol, but also about sugar-based, sugarcane ethanol, and the importance of biofuels in the world, and especially in a region like the Americas. Today we will go over some of the specific cases in these two feedstocks, cases going from Brazil to Paraguay to also the private sector and the academia, to analyzing some of these major trends and main topics that are right now being discussed, and that will be the future of biofuels, and again, grains and sugar-based biofuels. We've talked about GHG emissions reductions. We'll go over some of the sustainability aspects, of course, but it's not only sustainability and environment that involves biofuels. We also have other impacts that we've seen over the conference and that we will talk as well today. Impacts in terms of social benefits, of economic benefits, and overall benefits of those countries that are producing and blending ethanol. We will also be addressing some of the technological and innovation issues related with grain and sugar-based biofuels, and for that we will be focusing in some specific cases. As mentioned before, the Americas, the region including from Canada to Argentina, is the region in the world that produces and uses more biofuels in the world per average. And that's why we will be talking and hearing from our experts on specific cases such as Paraguay, Brazil, of course, the United States, and some of the global trends. So without further ado, I want to introduce the first speaker to this session. I will introduce Linda Schmid from the U.S. Grains Council, and Linda will be providing us a brief presentation on bioethanol trends.
Thank you, Federico, and thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here amongst so many experts on bioethanol. I've learned so much in the past couple of days. And I want to talk briefly about the bioethanol trends that we're seeing on a global basis. The U.S. Grains Council represents 300,000 producers on 90 million acres of land in the U.S., including 200 bioethanol plants. We represent the entire value chain of bioethanol. We also have offices in over 9 countries around the world in many different regions. So it gives us a bird's eye view of the types of policy trends that we're seeing. This is a map of bioethanol blending rates around the world. And I want to talk a little bit about what is driving these blending mandates. There are economic, environmental, and health reasons for these blending mandates. For example, some countries, we think about the economics of fuel and fuel blending. Some countries are eliminating subsidies to their petroleum fuels. And as they adjust economically to the elimination of these subsidies, they're increasing their bioethanol trends so that they can moderate the cost at the pump for citizens. So you'll see that Nigeria, for example, has recently eliminated subsidies for fuel. So they're increasing the amount, or they're looking to increase the amount of ethanol in the fuel mix. You'll also see environmental trends. So Canada has increased their blending rates at the provincial level, and they're doing this because of their clean fuel mandate. So that's another reason that you'll see blending rates increase. And also air quality concerns. That's another driver of blending rates. And of course, we see here that for the most part in high-income economies, a 10% blending rate is the floor. And then if we look at major producers like Brazil, you'll see a 27% mandate. And India is also moving towards a 20% mandate, primarily because they have such a great trajectory in sugarcane production. So they are trying to reduce their petroleum import bill. So I think we're seeing a trend towards increasing mandates, whether you're in a medium income economy, low income economy, or a high income economy. What we're also seeing is that governments recognize that bioethanol is a means to reach net zero emissions. So for folks who are following the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, countries submitted nationally determined contributions in 2022, and we went through a number of those contributions, and we saw that many governments referenced bioethanol in their NDCs. The best statement I saw was in Manitoba's provincial statement on bioethanol, and you'll see it up there, that they're reducing emissions by increasing ethanol and biodiesel fuel content requirements. You'll see it also, Colombia references specifically in their 2022 NDCs that they will use ethanol blends of E10. And then you also have references to bioenergy. So in terms of the policy environment, the new NDCs are due in February 2025, and countries are thinking about how to fit bioethanol into their nationally determined contributions to meet their commitments for net zero. And I think that over the course of the next 6 months, it's going to be very important for people to talk to agricultural ministers, energy ministers, transport ministers, to see how bioethanol can fit into their nationally determined contributions. And of course, the due date is February 2025, but we think that the announcements will come in Belém, Brazil at COP30. So we're looking forward to that. For bioethanol, I think folks, when they ask us about bioethanol and they talk about why was there this huge expansion in the United States in the 2010s of bioethanol, a lot of it had to do with decisions to eliminate MTBE and BTX from the petroleum mix. So when in the US we decided to prohibit those because of their potential for groundwater pollution, bioethanol, you'll see in the US there was a huge increase in production during that period of time. But it was really to replace toxic oxygenates in the fuel supply in the United States. And I think other countries are looking at how they can replace toxic oxygenates with bioethanol. And we'll see, for example, Mexico, perhaps they'll be considering this in the coming year or so. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the free cross-border flow of bioethanol. We know that bioethanol contributes to a reduction in emissions, and when we see tariffs and VATs at the border, we know that that increases the cost of decarbonization. So around the world, you'll see that many countries will maintain a tariff and also a value-added tax on bioethanol. And in some instances, in some countries, it's kind of a hangover from tariffs on alcohol. They don't make a distinction between alcohol and denatured bioethanol. So sometimes it is an old tariff really focused on alcohol. And also, in many countries, sometimes they don't import any bioethanol, but they maintain a tariff anyway. So when we're thinking about tariff rates, if governments want to change this, they are not actually getting any revenues because they're not importing bioethanol. So reducing these obstacles to the free cross-border of bioethanol will lower the cost of decarbonization. And I don't think this has come up much in the conference lately, but we really need to think about the costs of decarbonization, the costs at the fuel pump. So the lower the cost of bioethanol, the more you can use it, the more consumers will be willing to use it. So this is a policy issue that I think we need to pay more attention to. And in parts of the world where they're beginning to produce domestically bioethanol, you'll see historically that usually there's a stop-start trend where countries they'll produce, they'll have some good productivity for a couple of years. Maybe there's a bad crop, maybe there's insufficient production, and then there will be a backstop. And at that point, sometimes they need to import bioethanol fuels. So in terms of the market and the economy, it's important to have these free flow, cross-border provision of bioethanol so that you can strengthen development of production when there are climate issues that impact producers and may reduce the availability of bioethanol in the domestic market. The U.S. Grains Council is working with countries. Another thing that I haven't heard a lot about this past couple of days is the importance of building behind-the-border frameworks for bioethanol. So in a lot of countries, let's talk about low-income countries, they actually do not have a complete standard systems to manage bioethanol. So we are working in ECOWAS and ECA with partners who have been there before us, like UNIDO and UNFAO and Sustainable Energy for All, to support their standards initiatives. And when we think about the regulatory rollout, we're talking about establishing the standards, then adopting them, then capacity building for standards. And then when we see the private sector actually using them, seeing the labeling, and when we see quality control of the product and actually the standards functioning in the marketplace. So this is really a process, and some countries are at the beginning of this process, but it is really a coordinated effort across different ministries to not only adopt the standards, but to implement them so that it's actually functioning in the marketplace. I mean, another thing that I don't think that we consider is that, there are different types of concerns with fuel supplies in different countries. You have fraud in some countries where the petroleum supply or the fuel supply is not meeting the standards. They do have, in some countries, auditors that come into the gas stations to make sure that what you're putting in your tank is actually what you're saying it is. So these kinds of standards initiatives at the regional level and at the national level are quite important to making bioethanol available so that we can decarbonize and eventually reach net zero. This is really in closing, I just want to give a perception of what the production overview is. This is the order of production. This is from UNFAO data, and we see all of the different types of feedstocks that are used by different countries in the production of bioethanol. And I mean, I think I've really appreciated this conference to look at how these production processes can be made more efficient. And from our standpoint in the US, we are always looking at achieving smart climate practices for our producers. We have a lot of bioethanol plants that are working to use carbon capture and storage. And as I heard another expert say here, bioethanol can get us with carbon capture and storage to a negative CI if we can do that if we can do that in a significant way, bioethanol can provide that. And I always like to say bioethanol, you know, bioethanol contributes to climate action, sustainable energy, and good health, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In closing, this is the U.S. Grains Council's mission. We develop markets, we enable trade, and we try and improve lives. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Linda. We'll open now to question. If there's a question from the audience to Linda, we can also leave some questions for the end and after the other presentations. So if there's a question, raise your hand, please. If not, we will continue. And it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker of this panel session, Bruno Alves from UNEM, Brazil. And Bruno will be talking about corn ethanol production in Brazil, the current status and prospects.
Thank you, Federico. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I'm Bruno. I'm the Public Affairs Director of UNEM. UNEM is the Brazilian Corn Ethanol Association. We've been advocating in favor of corn and also different grains in Brazil for the last 7 years. And our vision goes way beyond grains market. We've been boosting the economy and the states that have been actually producing corn ethanol in Brazil, creating jobs, and promoting green business. We are representing now 70% of the corn-based ethanol plants in Brazil. And what we've been seeing here in Brazil is this. This is the image of what we have been experiencing in the corn production. Just 10 years ago, you used to make only 72 million tons of corn in Brazil. Nowadays, we are making at least 110 million tons a year. That's the reason why we have so many to do here. We've been doing so many things here in Brazil. We are also using different grains, such as sorghum, and we've been using triticale and different also pathways in order to make and produce ethanol in Brazil. And we do believe that we still have a lot ahead. Our expectation is to get to 2032 producing at least 170 million tons of corn in Brazil, and also we have different options in order to produce ethanol. And this is what we have now when we are talking about plants, ethanol, corn ethanol plants in Brazil. We are now with 22 plants operating. We have 9 authorized by the national authority, ANP, and at least 12 new announcements. We do believe that probably in the next 5 to 6 years, we have 15 billion investments and at least 14 new plants making ethanol from corn in Brazil. And essentially, what kind of plants that we have here? We have these full plants actually producing corn from ethanol, essentially, and also sorghum. We have flax. Flax is a sugar cane. We use sugar cane in the harvest season, and during the off season, we have been using the corn. It's a very good alternative for ethanol production in Brazil. And also we have full flax, and full flax is producing both all year round. We've been using sugar cane and also corn during all the year. And that's the reason why the production has been increasing. This year we have at least 9 million cubic meters of ethanol from corn, and we hope to have at least 16 in the next few years ahead. But it's not just a matter of how many plants we've been building here, though our plants have maximum 7 years operating. We have productive plants, and that's something extremely important for the picture that we have here. Our plants are now producing 440 liters of ethanol with a ton of corn. We've been using 305 kilograms of wood chips in order to provide steam and electricity. And we're also producing DDG, DDGS, and oil, and this amount, and also electricity. We've been generating electricity and exporting this to the grid. And related to the ethanol production, we also have the dry distillers grains market, been growing exponentially here in Brazil. We are now producing almost 4 million tons of DDG, DDGS, and proteins from the distilleries that are actually producing ethanol in Brazil. And this is a picture that I actually would like to share with you, because I think this is a good case in a certain way address what we've been talking here about sustainability. What we've been seeing in the state of Mato Grosso, that's the most important state for the production of corn ethanol in Brazil, is this. The reduction of the area necessary, the reduction of area that we've been using to raise cattle, so the pasture is coming down, and we are also seeing the increase of the production of cattle in Brazil. And at the same time, the production of DDG, DDGS, and different proteins from soybeans, from corn, and different options getting up. And so we are not using more or extra area in order to produce ethanol in Brazil. Actually, we are going exactly on the opposite direction. We've been using second crop corn in order to make ethanol, and also reducing the area necessary in order to produce protein, meat protein in Brazil. So what exactly we've been seeing ahead, and what we actually have now when we are talking about sustainability. So we have this production with a low carbon footprint of ethanol, as I said, using second crop corn, using wood chips in order to produce heat, and also we've been providing protein for the production of cattle. And we are now investing in different options also, because we have actually a plant in Mato Grosso that is already developing a carbon capture and storage technology. We hope to see it operating in the next 2 years ahead. And at the same time, in Mato Grosso and in different states, some of our associate members are actually investing in green methanol and hydrogen, both options connected to our future and the way we've been seeing the industry for the last few years. So looking ahead and trying to put the corn ethanol in Brazil in the middle of this energy transition, we see that actually will play an important role in the vehicles and light vehicles and heavy vehicles for ethanol, and hybrid cars are extending the lifespan of combustion engines. At the same time, aviation, as we see this, SAF is the most cost-effective and efficient solution to this GHG emissions in the aviation. I think aviation has no plan B for this. And in the maritime, we have at the same time ethanol and green methanol as possible and viable solutions for shipping. And hydrogen has synergies in the use of, I've been observing synergies in the use of hydrogen and bio-based value chains, and we can improve both using energy sources. And I think I still have 40 minutes. I would like to say it's very important to work together in these plans that we have and countries in South America and also with the US. We've been talking to different governments around the world about the importance of corn ethanol, and we are here trying to do the same exercise, and I hope we can actually, in the future, work together in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Again, we'll open if there is a question of the audience, or we'll continue with presentations and have questions after. Okay. Thank you, Bruno. We continue with the third panelist of this session. It's my pleasure to introduce Sofia Arantes. Sofia is researcher at Agroicone, Brazil, and she will be expanding more on this issue of corn ethanol, talking about sustainability of the Brazilian corn ethanol and the importance in the energy transition process. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sofia from Agroicone. It's a consultancy with academic characteristics. And today I will talk about a little bit about the sustainability of second crop corn ethanol in Brazil specifically, and its importance for energy transition. In those 3 days, we are talking about decarbonization, GHG reduction, and energy transition. And since 2017, here in Agroicone, we are working with some studies, academic studies, trying to bring more information about the sector. So in 2020, we published an article in Nature Sustainability, trying to bring more information about socioeconomic impacts and environmental impacts regarding industry that was being built in Mato Grosso state, in the Center-West region of Brazil. In this moment, we didn't have information about the sector. It was a new sector in Brazil, and we're trying to get more information about. Is this a viable industry that's being built here? It has positive or negative impacts, socioeconomic impacts, and also about environmental impacts. We want to see the difference comparing with other pathways, including sugarcane, because here in Brazil we had most production, we still had most production of sugarcane ethanol, and we're trying to see what was the impact in that moment. In 2021, we published, we have a participation in the book to contribute with corn ethanol in Brazil also. In 2033, I had my thesis on the same item, that was corn ethanol in Brazil. And more recently, we have 2 studies published, and a contribution in the bioethanol book that will be published recently. But we have the summary, also public version, in the public version. And today I'm going to bring information about the 2020 study that we had and the 2024. So just to get a briefly summary here, I'm going to talk about some impacts of the socioeconomic view, a bit of carbon intensity, land use change, and key messages and final considerations. So in that moment here, we use the same chart for energy flow, for energy and mass for the system. So similar what Bruno presented earlier, we are considering a unit that uses second crop corn to produce ethanol. And we have the main product that is ethanol, and the co-products, there are DDG, used for animal nutrition, corn oil, and CO2, that is the BECS technology that Bruno talked about. In the first study of 2020, we didn't consider the CO2 technology because it wasn't implemented yet. But in the difference of this recent study of 2024 is that we consider BECCS technology and the impact of this technology when we are looking to GHG emissions. And in this plant, we also considered the use of eucalyptus chips that is used to produce electricity and steam in the process and also export electricity to the grid. So in that moment, we have some questions. I already talked about them. We're trying to see the socioeconomic impacts, environmental impacts of this new industry that was being built in the Mato Grosso state. And in that moment, we look specifically for those variables for the socioeconomic and in the environmental impacts. So here I brought some information about in the operational phase of this industry, we can see positive impacts for the socioeconomic, new employments being created in the region, and also positive impact on GDP, taxes, and also sectoral production value. In the operational phase, we can see that main contributions are in the place where the industry is built. And when we see the investment phase, the spillover is, can be seen spillover's effect for the other states in the rest of Brazil. When we look for the carbon intensity, we use two different kinds of methodology. Both of them, we can see lower CI when compared to the gasoline or fossil fuel, and mainly due to the second crop. So in both analysis, in both methodologies that we used, both approach, we can see that the carbon intensity of the corn ethanol in Brazil is similar to sugarcane, but when you consider different approaches, we can have even lower carbon intensity. This was the first study also that brought some indirect land use change for the second crop corn. We had three different scenarios, in four different scenarios. In all of them, we had negative or close ILUC. We used the blue model. That is the model that is specific for Brazil. Today, in the international models, we don't have a second crop as a specific pathway. So this was an important result to bring more specific approaches for Brazil. So here we can see that when we use second crop as a specific technology in modeling, we can reach negative or even zero ILUC, that is in direct effect. Here, just the second article that was published in Nature, we're trying to expand the results that was found in the first article. So here we tried to bring two different modeling approaches using general equilibrium model and international model to see, well, we are going to expand this sector in Brazil. What will be the impact in Brazil and even international impacts? And we also try to have a relationship with the SDGs to see, will be worse or better if we implement and expand this sector in Brazil. So the model that we used, the general equilibrium model that we used, brought here some difference when we look for different classes. The F01 is the poor class, and the F10 is the richer. In this modeling, we can see, well, we expanded the ethanol sector in 5 billion liters. This will bring more income for the poorer classes and also more consumption for all classes. This is a result that we didn't have yet when we looked for in the first work in 2020. And this is an interesting result because we can see that the maize ethanol expansion increased income and consumption for the poorer classes. So we have a positive benefit when we look to the SDG 2, when we're looking for food security. We can see that when we invest in a unit, in a specific place, in this case, in the Center-West region, we can have positive impacts for the different classes. Oops. And when we look for the land use change perspective, the same study, this study in 2024, contributes also for the, is aligned with the first results that we observed in 2020. That is, when we introduce the corn ethanol sector in the Center-West, we have reduced area for pasture, reduced area for crops, and increased area for planted forests. This is mainly because when we, how I said earlier, when we produce ethanol, we also produce DDG. And DDG displaces conventional animal feed, that is corn and soybean meal. So when we introduce the DDG in the market, we use less conventional food, conventional animal food, feed, and we use less area for pasture, and we intensificate the system, the livestock system. Including in this study, we try to expand the frontier, not looking specifically for climate change, but using, but trying to bring another impacts in other indicators. So we have 18 midpoints categories analyzed and 3 endpoints category analyzed. When we look at the midpoint level, we can see trade-offs, but when we have endpoint indicators as a whole, we can see positive impacts in all of them. And here I want to add some. Linda brought some SDGs. Here I brought a bit more. We can see when we introduce the corn ethanol, the second crop corn ethanol in Brazil, we can have benefits and contributes to a bit more of SDGs. And here the key messages. I think I just passed my time, and I brought here some key messages. I think that the main one is we don't have a silver bullet for energy transition and decarbonization. I think we need to look to specific conditions. Here in Brazil, we have sugarcane and second crop corn ethanol expanding, and we need to use the technology that we have here. And for the energy transition and decarbonization targets, the corn ethanol here in Brazil is important pathway to achieve the targets that Brazil and the world wants to achieve in the medium and long term. Thank you, everyone.
Sofia, thank you very much for the presentation and the insights. I will open the floor if there's questions right now, or we'll continue with the next presentations. Thank you. Our next speaker is Vitor Paulo Vargas. Vitor Paulo Vargas from Yara International Brazil. And Vitor will be talking about assessing the impact of nitrogen fertilization in maize production. So, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizing committee for having me in this stage and to talk a bit about some interesting questions that the bioenergy sector could have. And I hope to answer some of them, or may bring just some insights for further discussions. I also like to bring some, maybe to increase the qualification of arguments to defend our ethanol production in this country, in Brazil. So I'll talk a little bit about this. Is more as in the same, keeping the speech of Sofia. I will bring also some scientific topics here, and I'll bring a bit about assessing, about the assessment of the impact of nitrogen fertilization on nitrous oxide emissions in maize production in representative soils in Brazil. So we are all aware about the importance of the bioenergy and biofuels on the commitments that many countries have made in the world, especially here in Brazil. But we also know about the importance of nitrogen fertilization and the production of the feedstock, both for sugarcane, but in this case for maize. Nitrogen fertilization accounts by 7% of the crop's carbon footprint, and from these, 40% is related to fertilizer production, while the other 6% results from in-field emissions. And this is a very important number that must be accounted in the assessments for the carbon footprint of ethanol. We know that for ethanol, the contribution of fertilizers ranges between 40 to 50%. So this is a very important input, and it must be accounted. But we also know that these numbers were obtained through assessments adopting the IPCC, or the International Panel on Climate Change, linear factor, which is currently as 1.6%. And we also know from here, especially in Brazil, that some studies conducted here in tropical conditions show that these numbers could be quite lower, and this will affect the carbon footprint. So to address this issue, we, in collaboration, Yara International, in collaboration with other institutions and coordinated by the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, has conducted a project which began in 2022 season across several regions, or across several environmental conditions in the southern part of Brazil, to obtain the fluxes of nitrogen, of nitrous oxide, and then to account for the emission factors in this region. So we know that the factors or the effect of fertilization can change or according to the environmental conditions. In this case, I selected just part of the study to show here, and I will focus on the soil types that we have. We tested in this project several nitrogen management practices, but here I will try to summarize some of the results over different soil conditions. So in this region, in the southern part of Brazil, the most important soils are the ferrosols, which is the last in the side, and these are also the soils, the most representative soils from Midwest, where most of ethanol production is concentrated. We can also see that all the soils represent, have different proportions in that region, and this also must be accounted when we are trying to obtain local emission factors. So now delving into a little bit in our results, we can see here in this chart we have the cumulative emissions and also the different soil types. We also have the number of observations. So this project was conducted in several fields, and we can see here that there's a big effect of the fertilization according to the soil type. So the effect of fertilization ranged a lot according to the conditions we had. And in plano soils, which are soils with poor drainage, the emission factor was equivalent to 3.5%, while for the acre soils and camp soils, it ranged from 0.5% to 0.99%. And these soils are characterized by new soils with a lower pedological development and with some compacted layers, especially for camp soils, and also a block structure that affects the emissions. Also for acre soils, we have the presence of a horizon with an abrupt increase in terms of clay content, which can lead to water accumulation in some level below of the top soil. But on the other hand, when we see for ferrosols, which are the most important soils in Brazil and a very characteristic of our tropical conditions, we see that the emission or the emission factor is only 0.31%, which is very low compared to the established IPCC emission factor. And this is related to the well-developed structure of these soils, a very granular structure, also the high macroporosity, and also a good or favorable permeability that such soils present. And then we have this distinguishable conditions to emit nitrous oxide. Well, when we evaluate or by analyzing the grain yield and also the nitrogen uses efficiency, we also found notable difference among soils. So let's just go a little bit deeper. So for acre soils and plano soils, we had nitrogen was crucial to the production of to the feedstock production, and we see the highest yield increases and also the highest nitrogen use efficiency for the soil. So the fertilization was very important. For ferro soils, we had a lower yield increase, but the natural productivity from these soils, these well aerated soils, are very high. We can see through by the control productivity, but the response to nitrogen fertilization was low, and then the nitrogen use efficiency was at the same level. And for camp soils, we had the lowest grain yield productive, the lowest grain yield, and also a small response to nitrogen fertilization, and then at the same level, lower nitrogen use efficiency. And this will impact in this number, which is the nitrous oxide intensity, which is obtained by relating the emission of CO2 equivalent per ton of product, which is grain maize. So let's go a bit deeper in the results. So for acre soils and ferro soils, we had the fertilization didn't increase or increased in a shorter level the nitrous oxide intensity, especially for acre soils. We see that due to the very high response to nitrogen fertilization in those soils, we kept the nitrous oxide intensity at the same level than the control. For the ferro soils, we had the lowest levels of the nitrous oxide intensity, and this is related to the high productivity of this soil. So the yield potential of those areas were very high. Even with the fertilization, we achieved the lowest levels of the nitrous oxide intensity. And for camp soils, we found a lower nitrogen use efficiency or a lower yield response, and then it was boosted, the nitrous oxide intensity, showing a lower efficiency of the nitrogen in this case. So it was the response to nitrogen fertilization was low, and also the emissions were high when nitrogen was applied. And for plano soils, although we achieved a high nitrogen use efficiency in these soils, we found a very high nitrogen oxide intensity due to the soil conditions. So since the IPCC has a specific number, we tried to do that for the southern part of Brazil, combining the area of each soil with the agricultural landscape of southern part. And you see here that we have this distinguishable emission factors for each region. But our study got this number 0.6% instead of the 1.6%, which is actually the current number of IPCC. So it's a number much lower than those that has been currently used in the assessments. So we see that each region or the soil has a big impact on the emissions. Also the impact of nitrogen fertilization is dependent or relies on the soil type, and then we found this regionalized regional emission factor for the southern part of Brazil. And this is really also important. I'd like just to finish my presentation. So in conclusion, the emission factor or the effect of nitrogen fertilization ranges according to the soil type or to the environment, and this must be taken in consideration during assessments for carbon footprint of feedstock or even for ethanol. We need to consider that. It's important to say that this is not the most representative region for ethanol production in Brazil, but as Bruno showed, there is also some plants going to that region. This corn is not the second season corn as showed by Sofia, so we still have some opportunities if we conduct the same kind of project in the Midwest region with lower levels of nitrogen. But we found that for well-drained soils, which accounts by more than 6% of the Brazilian area of maize, emission factor equivalent to 5-fold lower than the IPCC. And this is very important to demonstrate how our soils or our conditions are sustainable and good to the production of ethanol. Also important to say that, well, according to the soil type, we can develop specific mitigation strategies. So since for plano soils, the biggest impact was related to the in-field emissions, but for fertile soils, the biggest impact is related to the fertilizer production, because then in the fertilizer, in the carbon footprint, it would increase it to be 60% of the total feedstock footprint. But for plano soils, the in-field emissions would be much higher and would account for by 8% of the total. So it's important then to consider during the mitigation strategies according to each condition. So I'd like to thank all the collaborators of this project. Yeah, and thank you all for the patience and listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paulo. Really interesting information, and I believe that shows also the great opportunity that it brings to the growing sector of corn ethanol in Brazil. A question from the audience to Vitor Paulo. In that sense, we will continue with our fifth and last speaker of this session before entering into broader questions. It's my pleasure to introduce Tiziana Pirelli from the Global Bioenergy Partnership, and as well from the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at FAO. Tiziana will be talking about grain and sugar-based biofuels and sustainability, with a specific emphasis on the Paraguay experience. So welcome, Tiziana.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes. So I apologize since the beginning because some of this slide was already in my previous presentation, but they are required to give up some background information. So as Federico was mentioning, I work at FAO and I'm part of the FAO energy team. We work inside to implement the Energy Smart Agri-Food System program, which focus mainly on 3 pillars. The first thing is to provide renewable energy to the agri-food system to enhance access to energy, and also to replace fossil fuel in the agri-food system, which is very intensive in terms of energy consumption. Then the second aim is also to enhance the sustainability and increase the efficiency of use of energy in the agri-food system. And the third pillar is the production of energy from the agri-food system. And this is where the Global Bioenergy Partnership operates. Just to give you an idea of the importance of that for us is of monitoring the production of bioenergy and to assess the sustainability of bioenergy production. And we count on two long-standing FAO tools. The first one uses an ex-ante approach. So in case where there are countries that have not yet an established bioenergy system, we and the government ask us to assess with an ex-ante approach the potential for bioenergy production by using different type of feedstock available at local level. In the other case, in case we have an established bioenergy system, we use the GBEP sustainability indicators to assess the sustainability of various bioenergy value chains. These indicators can be used to assess all types of bioenergy value chains. And these have been developed thanks to a long period of negotiation of 6 years, in which Glaucia was also involved, as Brazil is one of the 19 members of GBEP, among which we have country government and international organizations. As you can see, the sustainability of the value chains is defined by 3 pillars. Not only the environmental one, not only by greenhouse gas emissions, but also other 2 pillars, social and economics. And the fact that each pillar includes 8 indicators was done on purpose and was the result of the negotiation, because this is to transmit the message that each pillar is equally important. So the GBEP indicators are applied at a national scale, use an LCA approach, an LCA thinking, as it was said in the previous session, and all of them are science-based. The main goal is to inform policy formulation and to monitor progress towards the achievement of SDGs and NDCs. These other publications are available on our website. There is an implementation guide. After having implemented the indicators in many countries, we have developed an implementation guide and a rapid implementation framework to help in the use of the indicators. And in red, I highlighted those indicators who could be used for the assessment of the sustainability of the bioeconomy, because this will be the next step. These were developed and published in 2012, but our aim now, within the Global Bioenergy Partnership, is to understand how this indicator could be applied to assess the sustainability of bioenergy in the context of the broader bioeconomy, but in the sense taking into account the competitive use of resources, the circularity, and so they must be further developed. And we will involve scientists from all the governments that are members of GBEP and the international organizations. This is just a map of where so far the indicators have been implemented in 15 countries and on different bioenergy value chains. For instance, in Paraguay, they have been implemented so far on 3 value chains, bioenergy value chains, and Germany has implemented twice the indicators on biogas. But all the publications are available on the website. I will focus for this presentation mainly on Paraguay, because this is the case in which we have production of ethanol from sugarcane and from maize. And I think you will find very interesting information also from Brazil, for the case of Brazil. We have implemented this study from 2016 to 2018. And at that time, after a consultation with all local stakeholders, we identified 2 main value chains for the production of bioethanol, the use of sugarcane and the use of maize. The sugarcane, to assess the sustainability compared to the baseline, in the case of sugarcane, we consider 2005 as baseline year. 2005 was the year in which the government introduced the first biofuel supporting law. And we identified two production systems, one at small scale and the other one at medium and large scale, in which sugarcane is produced. At the beginning, we thought that there was only one system, but while doing the analysis, we realized that considering the two scale was extremely important because of the different practices that they were using. For instance, one important was the adoption of fertilizer. At small scale, they use a lower amount of fertilizer, and so the greenhouse gas emission profile is different, is completely different, and the land use change as well, because they got very low yield. And in the case of maize, we focus mainly on maize safrinha, so the second crop that at that time was already the only source of maize used for ethanol production. And as baseline, we used 2008, because this was the first year in which maize was used for ethanol production. So these are already some of the results, and of course the fact of monitoring the production of ethanol in the country is not a result, but it's important because what we found is that this increasing in ethanol production was obtained only thanks to the existence of an enabling policy framework in Paraguay. In fact, since 2005, the government launched this Ley de Fomento de los Biocombustibles, and the production increased from 57 million liters in 2005 to 280 million liters in 2016. But at that time, there were 12 ethanol plants, 9 of them were flex, as was mentioned before by Bruno. 9 plants were flex and have the flexibility to use both sugarcane or grains as raw material, and the other 3 produced ethanol exclusively from sugarcane. In 2015, the government released a new law supporting the domestic ethanol market, and this law was fostering the import of flex fuel vehicles and requires at least the 30% of the state vehicles to be flex fuel. And this further fostered the sector. Regarding land use change, this was regarding sugarcane, for instance. We considered that the production of ethanol was strongly correlated with the increase in harvested areas of sugarcane, while the correlation was very low with the yield. So at the end, the yield didn't, in the period analyzed, didn't increase so much, and it was very low. At small scale was only 40 tons per hectare, and at medium-large scale, 65 tons per hectare. If compared with the rest of the region, for instance, in Peru, the yield at that time was 120 tons per hectare in the case of sugarcane. So the yield was very low, and one of our recommendations is exactly to sustainably intensify the sugarcane production. In the case of maize, regarding land use change, we haven't seen the same correlation. In fact, the harvested area of maize safrinha didn't increase so much. And so the land use change at the end was very low compared to the value that was at the end for sugarcane, while the production of ethanol was more related, still not significantly, but much more related to the increase in the yield obtained in the analyzed period. Still, the average maize yield was in line with the rest of the region, but was around 4.5 tons per hectare, but was very low compared to the one that is obtained in Europe, for instance, that is around 15-18 tons per hectare. Okay, so these are the results of the indicator 1 on greenhouse gas emissions. And so we analyzed the the systems with a life cycle approach. And what we have seen that the land use change is the most important component in terms of greenhouse gas emission in the final calculations. And it is particularly relevant in the case of sugarcane at small scale due to the low yield, but also to the fact that the crop cycle is different. It's 10 years compared to the one of 5 years in the case of large scale. The inputs are very low, so as you can see, for instance, in the cultivation, the contribution of cultivation in the case of the small-scale plant is quite lower compared to the one of sugarcane and at large scale in maize. But at the end, it comes that the ethanol produced from maize safrinha could contribute to reduce greenhouse gas emission of 50%, while from sugarcane of 40%, and for sugarcane it cultivated at small scale only of 23%. This consideration has to be taken into account when we, this is important, the traceability is important to understand from where the maize or the sugarcane came from. These are another very important result, and this is just to show that as part of the GBEP indicator, we have an indicator that is indicator 10, that is fully dedicated to assess the, let's say, the food versus fuel dilemma, in the sense that it assesses the price and supply of a national food basket and how these change when the production of ethanol in a country from a specific feedstock increase. And we use the AgLink COSIMO model. It's a model developed by FAO and OECD. It's a multiple commodity model, and the name is COSIMO because it's a commodity simulation model and partial equilibrium model. It considered two different scenarios. It analyzed the historical scenario, so from 2005 to 2016, and the future scenario. Regarding the historical scenario, we have seen the results. The results says that were aimed to assess the impact of ethanol consumption in the country on the market and price of sugarcane and maize. At the end, it comes that the national demand for ethanol as biofuel didn't influence the increase in local production of ethanol, nor the diminished use of sugarcane and maize for food. The production of ethanol influences somehow the price of maize and sugarcane, but it simply reduced the rate of decreasing of the price for consumers. So the price for consumers of maize and sugarcane continue in any case to decrease, but with a lower rate. For the future scenario, we have assessed the potential impact of an increased ethanol consumption in the country on sugarcane and maize market. And also in this case, the results are that a rapid increase of bioethanol consumption for transport was foreseen, and this would have implied an increase in the national production of sugarcane and maize, but also a reduction in maize export for the country. The price for consumer, also in this case, will not be affected in the same manner and will continue to diminish. And at the end, the production of ethanol didn't affect the availability and the price of sugarcane and maize in the country. So the final recommendation that we gave to the government were to take into consideration seriously the land use change, to reduce it or to try to avoid it where possible, and to sustainably intensify the feedstock cultivation through the adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices, and to consider also irrigation in case of emergencies during drought, and to adopt more productive varieties, increase the For instance, in the case of maize, the number of seeds per square meter, improve inputs and technologies, and especially in small-scale farm, avoid burning of crop residues. And the policies should intensify industries that have sustainability certification to minimize main environmental and social risks. And we also ask to increase investment for the development and application of innovative technologies and processes, such as novel feedstock, considering marginal lands, BECUS, and to consider bioenergy as part of the broader bioeconomy. That is something that is happening now in Brazil with this production of many products from the same value chain. As a final, let's say, lessons learned from our experience in Paraguay, and not only, but in the implementation of the indicator all over the world, we have understood that sustainability is absolutely essential for bioenergy, and we must ensure that bioenergy is produced and used in a sustainable manner. But when we think to sustainability, we must consider all the three dimensions of sustainability. So not only greenhouse gas emissions, but also the social and economic components. Monitoring is the way to ensure a continuous development and sustainable development of the sector, because through monitoring we can understand what are the weaknesses and how to overcome barriers and how to take out, for instance, the best of opportunities, reduce these risks and trade-off. And for the monitoring, it's essential to involve stakeholders, because stakeholders are the only ones that know very much well the context and know the social issues and knows the priority, which are the needs and which are the priorities of the country. So a sustainability assessment cannot be done without involving the stakeholders. Of course, the monitoring is important also to inform policymakers and to develop new policies. And we have seen in the case of Paraguay how much establishing a policy environment that is supporting is important, is required, not only to attract investment, but also to use new technologies to foster research, development, and innovation, and to build consumers' trust. So these are my this is my final slide, and thank you. I'm ready to answer your question.
Thank you very much, Tiziana, and thank you for that broader perspective and framework that FAO has been working in the specific case in Paraguay. Very valuable. And I do have a question maybe for the recognizing one that we are in a grains and sugar-based biofuels panel, but also the wide variety of organizations that are represented in the stage. And it's related with a topic that has been discussed over the past days, and you mentioned it in your presentation, and it's the food versus fuel debate. I would like to maybe ask you to expand a little bit more on what your sector or your organization is doing in that field in terms of ensuring the food security, especially when we are talking about sugarcane, sugar-based biofuels, or corn or grains biofuels. Yours, microphone.
Is that working? Yeah, I think you can hear me. Well, first thing I would like to say is that actually it's not just a matter of using second crop corn as an option in order to produce it. Because this is actually something important. When you have soybean, the first crop, and after that you have a second crop to use the land and improve the quality of the soil and have other aspects that actually are making the production of the first culture even better. This is something that actually helps to increase the productivity of food in the regions that are actually having corn ethanol. But besides that, we also have the possibility to give to the market a product such as DDG, the DGS, that has at least 30% plus protein than the grain by itself. So we have these two things, two elements helping with food security. And beside that, we also have the aspect that this product, the GG and the GS, goes to the cattle, and also to different animals in order to make even more protein. So we've been helping in different ways, you know, food security. What we just saw here is that actually we are improving the energy security related and integrated with the food security. So this is a false dilemma between food security and energy security.
I think, Federico, we like to say food and fuel because, as my neighbor has said, when you produce bioethanol, you are also producing DDGS. So I think a third of bioethanol production goes to high protein feed that feeds animals. And access to food is an economic issue. It has to do with distribution. It has to do with income. So although it seems like a simple problem, food or fuel, it's actually much more complicated than that in terms of how the economy works. I mean, some countries address food concerns by providing a baseline income. I think Brazil has a program for that, and I can't remember the exact name for it, but it is a function of providing people with a baseline income so that they can afford food and other resources that they need. So we cannot solve all issues through the paradigm of bioethanol production. If we have food concerns, that means that we have concerns about whether people have the income and access to food. In the United States, we have abundant production of bioethanol and absolutely abundant production of agricultural products. We are an agricultural producer. We are an agricultural exporter. That's one of our largest exports. I think Brazil also is #1 on agricultural exports across the board. So not only are we exporting a tremendous amount of bioethanol, we are also exporting a tremendous amount of fruits, vegetables, beef, you name it. We produce all of it. So I think it is a false dichotomy, as you said.
I don't know if I can be more specific than Linda and Bruno, but maybe I can have additional information about when we produce DDG, and indirectly, we are also producing more protein because we intensify the livestock production. So we supply more protein, not only livestock, but also pork and chicken and other animals and another kind of proteins. In this last study that we published in Nature in 2024, now this year, we tried to see if the expansion of second crop corn ethanol will have benefits or no for food security, specifically looking for the SDG 2. And we use the general equilibrium, the international general equilibrium model to bring results for the socioeconomic part, and we see that we don't have income reduction and not also consumption reduction. We have a bit of increase, so we don't impact food security when we're looking to the income or consumption view. And food security, when we look as a whole, we don't have a variable that we say we can see to this and see if it's a positive or a negative impact with only one variable. We need to see a bunch of variables to see if we are impacting or no. And we also published a recent study to see if the expansion of corn ethanol in Brazil will affect price of corn. And we didn't saw that. We saw that the international market may impact the corn ethanol, the corn in Brazil, but not the expansion of corn ethanol. So we need to look to income, to consumption, to availability, to quality, to price, to see if we can or not impact the food security. So I agree with Linda. I think in the United States and Brazil, we can produce both. We can produce energy and food, and we have agriculture area to produce all, We have yield increased in the last years. We have new technologies, so I think we can produce both.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Just to make a quick comment, as Yara, as a company, we are trying to understand all the value chains and, of course, trying to support to close some gaps of knowledge. And this is one of the examples as to try to understand how is the impact of the utilization of nitrogen, for example, in the value chain bioenergy sector. So, of course, we need to hear all voices, and it's also very specific for several regions. So when we see, for example, for Americas, obviously it seems that, well, it doesn't compete, but maybe it could be different for other ends of maize as a product, as a feedstock. So Yara, what Yara does is to try to understand the specific sectors, the different regions where the company is, and trying to support to close some knowledge gaps that are still important to be closed.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you. For FAO, of course, the food versus fuel dilemma is extremely important. For us, it's important not to export a model that here works and maybe doesn't work in another country. It's not to give them for granted. We have the recent publication from OECD and the trade division of FAO have said that this food versus fuel dilemma is not anymore, let's say, real, but the truth is that it requires continuous monitoring. And what I said with my second slide is that if we go in a country where bioenergy production is not yet in place, we cannot take for granted that we will not compete with food production. And recently we have been in Rwanda and Uganda for a project on the use of bioethanol for clean cooking. And both of the countries were interested to start their own bioethanol production. But still in Rwanda we have seen that cassava and sugarcane, which could be the feedstock that could be dedicated to ethanol production, still represent staple crops and are used for food. And this, implies that there couldn't be an ethanol production at local level. But the BEF's approach, the bioenergy food security approach, is the model, is the tool, let's say, to assess more deeply into and to go more deeply into the detail and to assess with an ex-ante approach if the building a bioenergy value chain at local level could be feasible, could be suitable, or and will bring the economic benefits and social benefits that could derive from a bioenergy value chain. But it's not that a bioenergy value chain brings every time the same benefits. It depends from the context, and we should keep this into account. Maybe in Brazil, I don't know, because I don't have, it seems that it works, but in Paraguay I can say that it works, but it could be further improved for sure. And monitoring is the key. Continuous monitoring and assessing is the key to identify the challenges. And so I will continue to stress this because it's something that is always evolving, and also temporal conditions are evolving and priorities of people are evolving. If you consider, for instance, the energy crisis that we had in Europe after the Ukraine wars, everything has changed after the war started. So definitely, not only the geographical but temporary context should be taken into account.
For sure. Thank you. If there's a question, please raise your hand. We still have 4 minutes before closing the session. If not, I will ask the last question if possible, and again, recognizing the diverse variety of organizations. And it's related with what can be done at the national level, at the international level, from an association, from an international organization, from your perspective, to continue advancing biofuel policies in their countries and in the world in a more collaborative and partnership approach, as we've seen in the past 3 days in the conference. So maybe ending on that note of collaboration and partnership, but from your perspective. I don't know if someone wants to start.
What I can say, once again, I would say that the stakeholder engagement is important, is extremely relevant, and it's important to measure the sustainability through science-based approach and to provide this information, science-based information, to policymakers, so that they could elaborate new policies on the basis of real data. And yeah, considering this flow is important, and stakeholders engagement is important, because once again the prioritization of needs comes from stakeholder.
Right.
So, and so I will give these two, let's say, suggestions.
Well, from Yara, what I could say is that, well, Yara is concerned with the development of a realistic or reliable framework in terms of regenerative agriculture, taking action in several KPIs related to sustainability. And we are already in several levels talking with different stakeholders from the value chain of the food production, bioenergy, also involved with the discussions with the academy. We just had an example here, and we have several. We have a group of more than 200 researchers and a big group of working on global innovation, so which is very focused, or these people are very focused on trying to understand what are the key problems that we have around the world, and especially this chain is really important in the Americas. So we are in the same level that we are trying to develop products or even improving recommendations on the agronomic level. We are also trying to discuss with the different levels of stakeholders to improve the feasibility of the production of bioenergy.
Thank you, Vitor. Sofia, and then we have one question from the audience and we'll finish. But please, Sofia and Bruno.
I'm still thinking, but I can say something that at Agroicone, we try to get in touch, in contact with different stakeholders. So the government, private sector, public sector as a whole, and academic sector, to see the different visions. And I think we need to, I think this is not a own responsibility of the government or of the private sector. I think everyone needs to work in a collaborative way, so we can go further in the decarbonization process and energy transition, and also looking for ethanol in Brazil. Today we have the Renova Bio that gives a little bit of security for the sector to provide new investments. But I think we need more. I think we need to hurry a bit more. Some things here are a bit slow. They don't see that the problem is now. They're always looking forward. And 2030, it's like five years. And we're late. So I don't think that the responsibility is only one institution or company, or I think we need to work together to reach our targets as soon as possible.
Thank you. Bruno?
Well, I'll try to go straight to the point. I think bioenergy must be in the center of the agenda, of the political agenda internationally. And so it has to be discussed in conferences and different meetings of the government, and must play an important role in the agenda internationally. But besides that, I also think that we need a common ground, and for me, the common ground that we have to use to communicate and express ourselves is the science. So I think that we have to use the numbers and the metrics of the science. I think that's.
Thank you.
I think from experiencing the Be Best conference over the last 3 days that I think the scientists create a forum for policymakers to come together that is very cooperative. I think bringing data to the fore enables policymakers to really look at the facts instead of the ideology. So I think we need more of these scientific conferences that will attract policymakers because there is urgency. And we know that bioethanol is a pathway to net zero, and we need to get there quickly. So when I leave here, I'm going to understand that I think we can improve the policy debate by bringing data to the fore and also cooperating where we have common ground. I think that's very important because we do have common ground and we need to cooperate where we find it.
Thank you, Elaine. Jim, please.
Yes, thank you. My question may relate to what you've just been describing, but could you specifically provide recommendations on how to address what seems to be the primary area of disagreement in terms of when it comes to life cycle accounting and this topic, and that is direct and indirect land use change? How we could get to like a global harmonized approach to accounting for direct and indirect land use change in the LCA equations.
Maybe I can contribute a little. When we look to land use change, the indirect way, I think we don't have a common way to look forward. We need to be specific for each region. We also don't have a model that can look at a macro way to achieve all pathways. We need to be specific, and when we look in the ground values, we can see that if we look to specific values from Brazil, we can have better data and have more realistic numbers. So we're trying to go forward when we look for the indirect land use change is not to try a modeling approach, is trying to use management and practice that can reduce the ILUC risk. So when we use and you expand in marginal lands, we can have lower possibility of land use change, or when you have a yield increase during the years, we can also have a reduced land use change. But I think we also need policies to don't stimulate the advance of land in other uses, like when you look to the primary vegetation. And what the regulation as a whole is trying to do is trying to use the modeling and complement with those management risk practices. So I don't think now we don't have a global way to do, but we're trying the specific regulation in specific places, trying to use in specific ways also.
Linda?
I would just add that from an industry standpoint, we understand that land use change is a metric to grade that regulators are using to grade. And what we do in other industries is we have complementary policies. If the concern is an environmental concern about protecting land, protecting a species, then you need to address that directly. You need to strengthen environmental protection agencies. You have to strengthen laws on conservation. If that's the concern, you have to strengthen those complementary policies so that the land use change debate does not hold back industry, because that regulatory discord is impacting the marketplace and slowing progress in investment and solving, the development of new e-fuels. So we need complementary policies that address it directly.
Someone else? Okay, thank you. And with that, we conclude this session. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much for attending. And we invite you to a closing ceremony at 4 p.m., if I'm not wrong, after a small break that will be done. So thank you very much.